Imagine a weapon that doesn't kill directly. It targets the very systems the 21st century depends on. It doesn't use a nuclear warhead. It doesn't use a biological virus. It uses a simple hydraulic arm. We like to think the cloud is wireless. We think it lives in the sky. But that is a lie. Over 95% of international internet traffic, trillions of dollars a day, diplomatic cables, military targeting data, your personal medical history, travels through physical fiber-optic cables lying on the bottom of the ocean. These aren't armored vaults. They are glass strands, often no thicker than a garden hose, resting in the freezing mud miles beneath the surface. We assume these cables are safe because they are deep. We assume at 1,000 meters, the crushing pressure of the ocean is the ultimate shield. We are wrong. The Russian Federation has built a ship designed to operate where only a handful of specialized manned military or research platforms can operate. It is designed to dive to the bottom of the abyss, to operate in proximity to seabed infrastructure, and, if the order is given, to interact with it. The West calls it AS-31, or Project 10831, but the Russian sailors call it Losharik. It looks like a cartoon, it sounds like a joke, but it is one of the most specialized, expensive, and secretive naval engineering projects ever undertaken. This is the story of a ship made of titanium spheres. It is the story of the elite Hydronauts who crew it, and it is the story of the catastrophic fire in 2019 that almost turned this technological marvel into a nuclear tomb. To understand the ship, you have to understand who owns it, and it is not the Russian Navy. If you look at the standard organization chart of the Northern Fleet, this ship doesn't exist. It belongs to GUGI, the main directorate of Deep-Sea Research. GUGI is to the Russian Navy what the NSA is to the U.S. Air Force, mixed with NASA. It is a separate, shadowy intelligence agency that reports directly to the Ministry of Defense. Its mission isn't naval combat, it is special engineering operations. Their officers are not regular sailors, they are hydronauts. To be a hydronaut is to enter a priesthood of the deep. You don't just sign up, you are selected. On a regular submarine, the crew is 100 men, mostly young enlisted sailors. On Losharik, the crew is just 25 men. But here's the anomaly. The rank structure is inverted. There are almost no junior sailors. The man scrubbing the filters or checking the valves is likely a senior officer, a captain of the second or first rank. This is a crew composed almost entirely of commanders. Why? Because they work in an environment where survivability margins are very thin. They operate at depths where rescue is severely limited. Standard NATO rescue systems are rated for roughly 600 to 1,000 meters. Losharik operates far below that line. If a pipe bursts on a standard submarine at 300 meters, you have a chance to plug it. If a pipe bursts on Losharik at its operating depth, the external pressure forces a water jet into the hull capable of rapidly eroding metal and structural components. You fix it in seconds or the ship is lost. When intelligence analysts first reconstructed the shape of the Losharik from spy satellite imagery, they were baffled. It didn't look like a ship, it looked like a chain of pearls. This bizarre shape is the secret to its survival. Standard submarines are cylinders. A cylinder is easy to manufacture. You roll a steel plate into a tube. But at extreme depths, a cylinder has a mathematical weakness. It is a matter of stress distribution. When external pressure pushes on a cylinder, the hoop stress, the force trying to crush the tube, is defined as PR/T, pressure times radius divided by thickness. But in a sphere, the geometry is perfect. The pressure is distributed equally in all three dimensions. The stress formula becomes PR/2T. In plain English, mathematically, a sphere is twice as strong as a cylinder of the same thickness. The Losharik is a polyspherical pressure hull, 7 titanium spheres joined by short, claustrophobic tunnels. While the exact crush depth is a state secret, Western analysts estimate it can reach deeper than 1,000 meters, potentially much deeper. This allows Losharik to reach parts of the ocean floor that are off-limits to hunter-killer submarines. It possesses a unique capability: retractable skids. Unlike nuclear attack submarines, which must keep moving to cool their reactors, Losharik can physically park on the seabed. It can sit in the mud, engines silent, hiding in the sonar shadow of underwater mountains, invisible to surface ships. But geometry wasn't enough. They needed the ultimate material. Steel is too heavy. To build a steel sphere strong enough for these depths, the walls would be so thick the ship would sink like a stone. So they used titanium alloy. Titanium is the holy grail of submarine building. It is as strong as high-grade steel, but roughly half the weight. It is non-magnetic, making it invisible to magnetic anomaly detectors. But working with it is an engineering nightmare. Titanium is reactive. It hates oxygen. If you weld it in regular air, it absorbs hydrogen and oxygen, becomes brittle and cracks. Every single weld on the Losharik, every seam of those 7 spheres had to be performed in an inert atmosphere. The welders likely worked in sealed habitats filled with argon gas, wearing spacesuits. And the design introduced a structural Achilles heel. The spheres are strong. The tunnels connecting them are the weak points. These junctions are stress concentrators. The engineering required to join 7 perfect spheres without creating a fatal flaw in the connective tissue took the Soviets and later the Russian Federation nearly 15 years to perfect. It is not just welding, it is molecular bonding on a massive scale. Laid down in 1988, the ship wasn't launched until 2003. Empires fell, economies collapsed, but GUGI kept pouring rubles into this one project. Why? Because the mission was too important.
What is the strategic value of a ship that crawls on the bottom of the world? It grants the Russian Federation a significant operational advantage in deep seabed environments. Losharik is equipped with manipulator arms, powerful LED floodlights, and sensitive cameras. It is essentially a manned spacecraft for the inner space. Western intelligence assessments suggest a 3-tiered mission profile. The survey. It maps the ocean floor with high-resolution side-scan sonar, characterizing the environment for future operations. It finds the trenches where cables are laid. The plant. It creates sensor networks. It can place autonomous listening devices, assessed by analysts to include long-duration power sources, possibly including nuclear-derived systems, near key transit points. These sleeper sensors listen for NATO submarines leaving port. And the interaction. This is the most controversial capability. While publicly unproven, analysts believe Losharik has the hardware to physically interact with subsea infrastructure. If tasked, it could plausibly damage undersea cables using mechanical means. Why does this matter? Because fixing a cable at 3,000 meters isn't like fixing a telephone pole. It requires a specialized ship, weeks of time, and calm weather. If multiple deep-sea cables were damaged in a short period, the global network doesn't just slow down, it fractures. But the Losharik has a fatal flaw. It is tiny. At only roughly 60 meters long and displacing about 2,000 tons, it lacks food stores and crew amenities to cross the Atlantic Ocean on its own. It is a deep submergence station, not a cruiser. So how do you get a short-range spy sub to the middle of the Atlantic without refueling? You carry it. The Soviet engineers developed the mothership doctrine. They took massive ballistic missile submarines and gutted them. They removed the missile silos and the warheads. In their place, they installed a massive docking mechanism on the belly of the ship. The Losharik is a parasite.
It rides underneath the mothership, clamped tight to the hull. The mothership, a massive nuclear taxi, carries it thousands of miles in secret. When they reach the target zone, the mothership stops, the clamps release, and the Losharik drops into the darkness. The primary taxi for the Losharik is the BS-64 Podmoskovye. This ship started life as a Delta IV class ballistic missile submarine designed to destroy American cities. In 1999, it went into the shipyard for a radical surgery that took 16 years. They cut the missile compartment out completely. They stretched the hull. They reinforced the keel. The docking mechanism creates a complex hydrodynamic interaction. You're essentially strapping a 2,000-ton object to the bottom of a streamlined hull. The connection points must withstand the drag of two submarines moving at speed. If the airflow becomes turbulent, the flow-induced vibration could compromise the connection or even rip the parasite from the host. The result is a highly effective stealth delivery system. A NATO destroyer hears a Delta-class submarine and assumes it's a standard patrol. They don't know the truck is carrying a burglar on its back. The most dangerous part of the mission isn't the dive, it's the redocking. Imagine trying to park a car in a garage. Now imagine the garage is moving. Now imagine the car is moving. Now imagine it's pitch black, you're underwater, and if you bump the walls, you could trigger a hull breach. This is what the Hydronauts have to do to come home. The Losharik has to approach the belly of the Podmoskovye with absolute precision. As the smaller submarine approaches the larger hull, it enters the boundary layer. Hydrodynamic interaction effects can complicate close proximity docking. The pressure variance between the hulls, often referred to as the Bernoulli principle in fluid dynamics, can create suction forces. If the pilot is not precise, the Losharik could impact the mothership. It requires nerves of steel. The pilot has to fight the water, align the hatches within millimeters, and engage the hydraulic clamps. It is a blind date with 20,000 tons of steel. To operate silently on the ocean floor, you can't always run the reactor coolant pumps at full power. You need a buffer. You need batteries. The exact composition of the Losharik battery system is a closely guarded state secret. But based on the energy density required for deep-sea operations, Western analysts strongly believe the ship was retrofitted with lithium-ion accumulators. On July 1, 2019, the Losharik was docked with the mothership in the Barents Sea. They were conducting bathymetric training in local waters. Inside the battery compartment, likely located in the forward section, something went wrong. Whether it was a component failure, a short circuit, or a system overload, the result was a release of energy that the ship could not contain. Smoke began to fill the compartment, but this wasn't just wood smoke, it was a chemical fog. The fire in Sphere 1 was catastrophic. In a sealed environment, a fire doesn't just burn, it consumes the atmosphere. While we cannot know for certain without the classified accident report, the symptoms described match a lithium-ion thermal runaway event. When these cells fail, they don't just get hot, they explode with the force of a grenade. But the heat wasn't the only killer, it was the gas. Combustion of modern battery materials in a confined space releases a toxic cocktail. Analysts point to the likely presence of hydrogen fluoride gas. When inhaled, it mixes with the moisture in the lungs to form hydrofluoric acid. It essentially burns the respiratory system from the inside out. In a confined space like a submarine sphere, the concentration would become lethal in seconds. The alarm screamed through the ship. The Hydronauts, the smartest, most experienced sailors in Russia, were trapped in a titanium tube that was filling with toxic smoke. On a standard submarine, a long cylinder, smoke rises to the ceiling. You can crawl on the floor to find a layer of clean air. But Losharik is made of spheres. When smoke enters a sphere, the ventilation fans and the spherical geometry churn it into a vortex. The sphere fills from top to bottom almost instantly. There is no clean layer. The smoke burst through the connecting tunnel from Sphere 1 into Sphere 2. The officers stationed there were hit by a wall of black fog. They had seconds to grab their PDAs. They realized the horrifying truth. The fire was in the front, the reactor was in the back, and the only way out, the docking collar to the mothership, was in the middle. There was a civilian on board. Reports identify him as an industry expert, likely there to monitor the equipment. As the smoke thickened, the GUGI officers made a calculation. Save the civilian. Captain Denis Delansky, the commander of Losharik, and Captain Nikolai Filin, a hero of Russia, took charge. They physically evacuated the civilian expert through the connecting hatch, out of the burning forward section, and into the relative safety of the aft spheres. He made it out, but the officers didn't follow him. They stayed. Why? Because of the reactor. If the fire spread unchecked through the open hatches, it would reach the reactor control systems in the aft spheres. If the reactor controls were compromised while the reactor was active, they risked a loss of reactor control or a serious nuclear incident. The officers knew the protocol. Seal the compartment. They slammed the heavy titanium hatch shut. They sealed themselves in with the fire. Inside the sealed spheres, 14 men fought to the end. They weren't trying to save themselves anymore. They were fighting to kill the ship's electrical systems, to stop the fire from spreading to the main bus. Their breathing masks only held 15 to 20 minutes of air. Toxicology reports later indicated they died of acute carbon monoxide poisoning and the inhalation of combustion products. They fell at their posts. Captain Delansky, Captain Filin, 12 others. An incredibly high concentration of senior talent gone in minutes. But their sacrifice worked. Sealing the compartment limited the fire's spread and protected critical systems. The reactor remained secure. The vessel did not suffer a nuclear incident. The mothership, Podmoskovye, initiated an emergency ascent. It brought both ships to the surface. The Russian Navy immediately declared a regime of secrecy. They towed the mothership directly into a covered wet dock. They were terrified of intelligence leaks. But they couldn't hide the bodies. 4 days later, in St. Petersburg, a funeral was held. It was closed to the public. The list of names on the tombstones confirmed the magnitude of the loss. It was a severe blow to GUGI. They had lost their brain trust. It takes 20 years to train a captain of the first rank for this kind of work. They lost 7 of them in 20 minutes. When the engineers finally cracked the hatch to Sphere 1, they found a wreck. The interior was gutted. The electronics were ash. But the spheres themselves, they were pristine. The titanium alloy spheres did not buckle. Despite the intense internal heat and the external pressure, the structural geometry held. The thermal conductivity of titanium allowed the heat to dissipate into the surrounding ocean water. The ocean itself acted as a massive heat sink. This was crucial. The fire destroyed the systems, but it demonstrated the resilience of the pressure hull design. Western intelligence expected Russia to scrap the boat. It would cost billions to rewire it, but Russia refused. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced, "The Losharik will be restored." Recent reports suggest the ship is currently undergoing a massive refit. It has been reloaded with nuclear fuel. Rumors circulate of a potential return to service. The ghost is coming back. While Losharik was in repair, GUGI built something even bigger. Meet the K-329 Belgorod. At 184 meters, it is the longest submarine in the world. It is a special mission mothership. It has a docking bay under its keel designed to carry the repaired Losharik or its smaller cousins, the Paltus class. But it also carries the Poseidon. Poseidon is a nuclear-powered autonomous system. It is the size of a school bus. While detailed capabilities are classified, it is designed to circumvent traditional missile defenses by traveling underwater, maintaining a strategic threat profile that is difficult to counter. The Belgorod combines the seabed warfare of Losharik with the strategic threat of Poseidon. It is a dual-threat platform, one weapon for the cables, one weapon for the coast. The threat to undersea infrastructure is no longer theoretical. In November 2024, 2 critical cables in the Baltic Sea were severed within 24 hours. While investigations focused on a Chinese merchant vessel dragging an anchor, the incident highlighted the fragility of the network. This is gray zone warfare, incidents that occur below the threshold of open war, accidents that look like attacks, and attacks that look like accidents. But Losharik isn't built for the shallow Baltic, it is built for the deep Atlantic. Analysts assess that in a high-end conflict scenario, platforms like Losharik could be tasked with operations against major transatlantic cables, the massive data pipes linking North America and Europe. It doesn't need to hack them, it just needs to be there. The fire on July 1, 2019 was a disaster for the Russian Navy. It wiped out a generation of their best officers, but it did not stop the mission. GUGI is a hydra. You burn one submarine, and they build a bigger mothership. The Losharik is being repaired, the Belgorod is operational, and a new generation of Hydronauts is training to fly their titanium spheres into the abyss. The ocean floor is no longer a sanctuary, it is an operational domain. And while we worry about satellites in space and hackers in the cloud, a very real capability is swimming beneath our feet, looking for a glass wire to touch.